I would like to introduce you now to Javier Padilla Reyes, an artist and organizer with Restore the Delta.
Good morning. My name is Javier Padilla Reyes. I'm a resident of Stockton, and I work with Restore the Delta members from throughout the Delta. The State Water Board held hearings which reached a consensus from independent scientists, NGOs, and government agencies that the Delta needs more water flowing through it, not less, especially during these dry years. While the other group here today insists that they must have more water to protect their jobs, they have forgotten that the jobs are also tied to the health of the estuary. People from every background work in the Delta, in the recreational industry, and the Bay Area / coastal fishing communities. These are small independent shops that were handed down from generation to generation. Fishing boats are handed down like farms, and service jobs and marinas and restaurants are all made up of entry-level jobs for workers entering our state's economy. Continuing to drain the Delta of its flows will just make it harder for these businesses to stay afloat, and many of its workers are going to join the ranks of the unemployed. But it doesn't have to be this way. We must manage California's water supply in a way that is sustainable, and it won't destroy the Delta. We must fix the levees. We must reduce the exports to sustainable levels, and especially during these droughts. Because 70% of the flow pumped from the Delta goes to corporate agribusinesses that chose to plant permanent crops on land where there is no reliable water supply. We must invest in regional self-sufficiency so that we can help each region become less dependent on the Delta. Do we really want to continue sending subsidized water to big corporate agricultural interests that are not sustainable when they only contribute 0.3% of the state's economy, all at the expense of Delta family farms, SF Bay fisheries, and our beautiful Delta estuary? Doesn't make any sense for the future of California or for our water. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Barbara Berrigan-Perea, and I'm Executive Director with Restore the Delta. Today, you're going to hear a lot about water management practices in California. Unfortunately, the press and Californians are going to hear a lot about a false dichotomy, that California's water problems are all about a fish versus people agenda. It's the message that large corporate agribusinesses from the Westlands Water District and the Kern County Water Agency have been pushing on the public through various organizations and media outreach since 2009. And while we agree with other groups that will be visiting the Capitol here today that we have a water management problem in California that is harming everyday people, the facts show that the cause of the problem and the solutions are very different than what will be represented to the press and to Californians later on this morning. An examination of water exports over the last 10 years reveals that the Westlands Water District and the Kern County Water Agency have taken more water from the Delta on an annual average basis for the last 10 years than the Metropolitan Water District and the Santa Clara Valley Water Districts combined, even though tens of millions of people reside within those urban districts. Yet Westlands and Kern County Water Agency, the growers within those districts, contribute less than 0.3% to the state's annual GDP. Today, January 16th, 2014, reservoirs in Southern California are filled to 93%, 97%, and 103% of capacity. And a few days ago, Jeff Keitlinger with the Metropolitan Water District, which serves a large percentage of Southern California, reported that they have enough water in storage for 2014, 2015, and into 2016. If this dry period should continue, they will be okay. So then, why are we all waiting for Governor Brown to declare a drought? And why are the groups who have been pushing for construction of the peripheral tunnels, which will cost ratepayers and taxpayers over $60 billion with interest and operational costs, why are these groups calling for the lifting of pumping restrictions to take even more water from the Delta in the present? It's because the Brown administration and the Department of Water Resources have failed to manage California's finite water supply during dry periods, even though California has historically experienced drought over a third of the time. As our friend Bill Jennings with the California Sports Fishing Protection Alliance stated the other day, we entered 2013 with Shasta, Oroville, and Folsom reservoirs at 115, 113%, and 121% of historic averages at the beginning of 2013. In April of 2013, they were still at 101%, 108%, and 96% of average. With no rainfall and little snowpack, DWR and the Bureau of Reclamation notified their contractors that water deliveries would be reduced. But they didn't reduce them in 2013. Instead, they actually exported 835,000 acre-feet more water than they said they would be able to deliver. DWR and the Bureau of Reclamation's gamble to overpump the Delta in 2013 not only had devastating consequences on Delta fisheries, salmon fisheries, the Sacramento River, and Delta agriculture, but it has now left Northern California reservoirs high and dry without water to share with the areas that depend so heavily on Delta exports in the present. As they do each and every year, state water officials capitulated to the demands of the leaders of the Westlands Water District and the Kern County Water Agency throughout 2013 to support their unsustainable agricultural practices. The failure to carry over storage and to plan for dry conditions, which are a regular part of California's climate, can only be described as gross mismanagement by our state's water officials. And to make matters worse, groups serving as the voice of the Westlands and Kern County water agencies are now poised to make the claim that the present drought problems are created by fish needing water. These same groups will embark on a fear campaign that 23 million Californians will be denied drinking water, which we know from those Southern California reservoir capacity numbers is simply not true. And perhaps what is worse is that they will continue to deny that the boom and bust cycle of poor water management decisions made by state officials has happened at the urging of the big agribusiness growers who are the last in line for surplus water in California. 2 40-foot boondoggle tunnels throughout the Delta or simply pumping the Delta dry are not solutions. This is why we called the press conference today, to point to the facts and to remind Californians that there is a better way to manage California water. First, we need to go back to exporting a safe yield from the Delta, not over pumping the Delta and depleting the watershed year in and year out. Second, we need to reinforce levees to ensure that the water that can be shared from the Delta is secure for all Californians. Third, we need to retire the drainage-impaired lands on the west side of the San Joaquin Valley from agricultural production. This will ultimately be cheaper than building the peripheral tunnels, and it will end the boom and bust cycle of poor water management decisions made by state officials to enrich a few hundred corporate agribusinesses. Most importantly, we need to put unemployed Californians back to work. We need to put them back to work by investing in smaller local water projects throughout the state that will actually put new water back into the system. Independent reports on water conservation show that local projects for every $1 million spent will make twice the jobs that would be created by the boondoggle tunnels in the Delta. These jobs involve training for a trade and will actually pay a living wage that can lift families out of poverty. This is the better solution for managing California's water. It is the solution for Californians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our press conference this morning.